Welcome to Special Education 101, Understanding IEPs. Our goal for today will be to provide you with a clear understanding of IEPs, your legal responsibilities as a teacher, and helpful tips to ensure your students are receiving their special education services. IEP stands for Individual Education Program. Essentially, this is an educational plan for a student that is eligible to receive special education services. It's important to know that an IEP is a legal document or agreement between a family and school, and it's required under IDEA to be followed. IDEA is the Individuals with Disabilities Act, which ensures eligible students with disabilities receive a free and appropriate public education. There are multiple factors under IDEA, and I recommend that you familiarize yourself with the components to better support students within your classroom and throughout the school. It's important to remember that even if you don't teach collaborative classes, you may still have a student with an IEP within your class. Another important note is that under Virginia Code, teachers can be dismissed from a teaching position for incompetence or noncompliance. This includes failing to implement a student's IEP. Before an IEP can be provided, a student must be found eligible for services. To be found eligible, a student's learning must be adversely affected by one or more of the 13 eligibility categories defined under IDEA. An emphasis is placed on the wording of adversely affected because this definition can look differently depending on who you ask. For example, a parent may view the student's learning to be adversely affected when they receive poor grades, while the teacher may view the same student as having tendencies of laziness or an unwillingness to work. This is why it is important to gain insight from multiple perspectives to ensure the IEP is looking at the whole child instead of just one factor, such as grades. The eligibility process is separate from an IEP. Even though we won't go into the details about the eligibility process during this video, you can speak with a special education teacher in your building for more information. Once a student is found eligible for special education services, the IEP team meets to develop the student's IEP. It's important to know that the discussion regarding eligibility categories should be held during the eligibility meeting and not before. If members of the team discuss this prior to the meeting, it may be considered predetermination, which is illegal under IDEA. The following are the 13 eligibility categories under IDEA. This means that a student must be found eligible under one or more of these categories to receive an IEP. Also note the acronyms for the categories, as many special education teachers and parents refer to these instead of using the full category name. The IDEA website explains each of these categories, and it's encouraged you review the definitions of each for more information, as many traits and characteristics can be found under multiple categories. As mentioned earlier, predetermination is where members of the IEP team discuss what their beliefs are about which category the student is eligible for prior to the eligibility meeting. It's important to have this conversation during the eligibility meeting when all members of the IEP team are present. This ensures that each member of the team, especially the parents, have input when determining eligibility for special education services. The IEP process looks similar in schools across the state. However, some exceptions apply to what you see here. Parental permission is required prior to testing or services. It's important to remember that parents have the right to refuse evaluation. Once parental consent is given, schools evaluate the student. During this time, you will be asked as the general education teacher to provide information on present levels of student performance. It's vital to provide this information because it may be the determining factor when considering whether or not the student is adversely affected. Work with the case manager, special education teacher, or designee that is collecting information for the eligibility meeting. In addition, a general education teacher is required to attend the meeting, so be ready and willing to participate if invited. Once the evaluation is complete, the team will meet for the eligibility decision. During this meeting, findings from the evaluation process will be shared, along with input from the parents and teachers. As a team, eligibility categories will be considered to determine eligibility for the student. Consult a special education teacher within your building for information as to what this meeting may look like. The team will determine that the student is either eligible for services or not eligible for services. Once a student is found eligible, the team develops an IEP for the student. This is then reviewed and agreed upon by the members of the team, including the parents. Once the team agrees on the plan, parents give consent for services to begin. During this process, it's important to know that many parents may feel emotional. When and if emotions are high, one must remember to be supportive and understanding. During this time, be willing to share your professional input, but remember it's ultimately up to the parents to provide consent for services, not the school. When looking at an IEP for the first time, it's normal to feel overwhelmed and even confused. Some important parts that you should be aware of as a general education teacher are the student's present levels of performance, sections on instruction and related services, accommodations, placement, and goals. Depending on the age of the student, there will also be information regarding transitional supports and plans for after graduation. Present levels of performance will assist the case manager in writing appropriate goals for the student. However, it is your responsibility to be aware of the goals and help students work towards progressing in their goals. In addition, you will need to provide input to the case manager when they are documenting the progression of their goals. Accommodations are unique to each student, and it is your legal responsibility to provide accommodations. Failure to do so may result in incompetence and noncompliance. Take time to review the accommodations for each student prior to school starting. Be sure to review accommodations when providing an updated copy of an IEP because they may change during the school year. You will also note the members of the IEP team. It's important to maintain open communication with all members of the team. Communicating openly and frequently with parents will help to create a successful school year for you and the student. Remember that you are a team, and it's expected that you communicate with parents on a regular basis. This can include announcements from your school page, emails, and phone calls. Don't wait for something to happen before making contact with parents. Make those connections early in the school year to help build relationships between school and home. In doing so, the parents will likely be more supportive if and when something were to happen that results in disciplinary action. Here are some things you should know to help you have a successful school year. IEPs are legal and confidential documents. Always keep this information in a safe and secure location. If the IEPs are printed and stored in your files for reference, it's up to you to ensure that they are kept away from student access. Secondly, the case manager is there to support you. If you have questions about the IEP, consult with the case manager for clarification. Lastly, if you are teaching a collaborative class with a special education teacher, utilize their knowledge and include them in planning and instruction. This will be beneficial to not only the students with IEPs, but all students in the class. To understand your legal responsibilities, it is important to understand what accommodations are because you will be implementing them within your classroom. An accommodation is an alteration of environment, curriculum format, or equipment that allows students to access the content and complete assigned tasks. Although students may refuse accommodations on a certain day, it is your legal responsibility to offer them each class as long as they are in the student's IEP. Each IEP is unique, and accommodations are provided to students if needed. Some common accommodations that you may see are small group, individual testing, read aloud, clarifying directions, check for understanding, extended time on tests, quizzes, or assignments, breaks, larger text size, and graphic organizers. In the IEP, it will clearly state whether this is for all settings. For example, a student may receive an accommodation for read aloud on all tests and quizzes, except when reading comprehension is being assessed. Take time to review accommodations and ask the case manager for clarification as needed. When assessing student progress, documentation is key. Be sure to set up a student data system that works for you. In the data system, include information such as progress, goals, student work, and log if and when a student refuses their accommodations. This information will be useful when participating in future IEP meetings for the student. It's a necessity to maintain student data systems for students receiving special education services. However, it's also beneficial for all students as well. Develop a system that meets the needs of your students and you. Remember to keep this data in a safe and secure location because it's considered part of the student record. Confidentiality should be maintained for all students. In addition to student data systems, communicate with the student's case manager anytime you notice the following: a change in student behavior or performance, a change in attitude towards people or school, refusing accommodations, and progress towards goals. Keeping a student data system and communicating with the case manager will ensure students are supported. In addition, this information will assist the case manager when providing progress reports to parents several times throughout the school year. If you have questions, please consult with your building special education designee, case manager, or special education teacher. You can also visit IDEA's website for more information. Special education forms can be found on the VDOE website for reference. Keep in mind that each school may have forms specific to their district, but the information contained in the IEP will mirror the sample IEP from the VDOE.